Hello and welcome to Texas Tim's CCCaster tutorial, setting up Netplay. My old tutorial is a little outdated. It was for Caster prior to 2.0. 2.0 has been out for a while now, and it changed the layout and options. So I figured I'd update my tutorial. So we're going to talk about installing the caster inside of a fresh install of Melty. We're going to talk about setting up the caster initially, controls and whatnot. We're going to talk about actually connecting to somebody or having somebody connect to you, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate that. And finally I'll touch on setting up port forwarding on your router if you're behind a router. I touch on that on every one of my tutorials. Might as well keep doing that. So, without further ado, why don't we move on into it? So here on my desktop, I have a fresh install of Melty in this folder here, and I have caster zip file, which I downloaded. So once you have Melty installed, it'll be in a folder called MBAACC, and it'll look something like this. You'll have your P files, your DAT file, you have the executable for MBAA, and you may have other shit in here as well. That's not really important. But this is where we're going to be installing the caster. So I'm going to close this for now and talk about where to get the caster. So I have it here on my desktop. The current version is 2.0 Delta. You can get that from the Melty Blood forums right here. So when you go to www.meltybread.com/forums, you're going to want to go to the Melty Blood Auditorium, and it'll be this first post here, CCCaster version 2.0 Delta. You click it in the first post, right at the top, there's the latest version download link. That MadScientist keeps updated as he releases new versions. So once you have that downloaded, you'll have a zip file. Looks something like this. I'm just going to go ahead and put that inside my Melty Blood folder. So I just moved the zip file inside my MBAACC folder that has Melty. More importantly, it has the MBAA executable right here. So now I'm going to extract that. So we'll extract, and we can see it did indeed extract. Got the caster executable right there. There's some DLL files that are probably down further. Regardless, caster needs to be installed in the same folder as the MBAACC link. So this caster executable needs to be in the same folder as this MBAA executable. Once that's done, installation of caster is complete. We can run caster and set it up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So when you run it, it'll pop up a little DOS window like this. It'll give you the current version here. You're going to want to make sure you have whatever stick or pad or whatever you're using as a controller plugged in before you run Caster, and it'll show you what you have plugged in here. And there's a box with some options on the side here, starting with option 1, Netplay, option 2, Spectate, and so on. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go set up our controls. So we would go option 5, Controls. I'm going to go into option 5 simply by hitting the number 5 on my keyboard. Now it gives us a sub menu with more sub options. If you only have one controller hooked up, you're player 1. So you would just set up player 1 controls. So I'm going to do that by hitting 1. And then it'll give us the control scheme here. So we can start configuring by hitting 1, and then it'll ask us to input for the various inputs listed. And as soon as we start doing 1, it'll just keep going down the list until we hit 0 for quit, or until we've done all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on my stick. So once it's done, I'll go ahead and hit escape, and then I'll stop configuration and take us back. And I'm going to hit escape again to exit out of the controls submenu, back to the main menu. Now we can look at option 6, which is settings, if we want to. Now in here we have some options. We can set the caster to send a little alert ping when somebody connects. We can also set up automatic rehost whenever there's a problem with somebody connecting when you're hosting. These are already set by default. The display name that is set in Melty on the controller scheme for Melty, that display name will be displayed in Caster as well. I can go ahead and show that, where you set that. So we would execute Melty like normal here to set our display name. And right here under network settings, username, that would be the display name. And once you do that, then Caster will draw from that to display your name. And you can also set spectator cap and so on. But once we set up controls, we're basically done. We can launch training mode with option 4 here from the Caster, and it'll have a delay setting. Let me go ahead and show that. Oops, I didn't exit out of the main menu. So I hit option 4, and we can enter a delay here. I don't really do training mode with delay, so but as soon as we hit enter, it'll launch the game for us via a script and go into training mode for us. I haven't done anything on my stick to get here. Once we get the character select, we'd simply select characters, and we'd have training mode functionality as normal. We can also broadcast. We can broadcast versus mode or training mode, and that'll allow people to spectate our broadcast. So, for instance, if I'm playing offline, if I have somebody over here, I can actually do versus mode through Caster here, through the broadcast option, and people will be able to connect to my IP address and watch us play offline Melty via this broadcast. I'm not entirely sure how well this feature works, though. You can also broadcast training mode. In addition to broadcast, there's a spectate mode. So option 2 is spectate. And from here we could type in IP address : port number and connect to somebody's IP address who's hosting, who has already somebody connected to him, and we could spectate their game, their Netplay game. So that's pretty cool. I'm not entirely sure how well it works, though. It seems to be more consistent in this version than it did in previous versions, but still has its issues. And last but not least, the main reason you're going to be using this program is for option 1 for Netplay. And so when you hit option 1, it's going to ask you for the IP address and port number to join, or just a port number to host. The default port number for Melty is 46318. 46318 is the default port number. So if you just type in this port number, you will be hosting from your global IP on this port. You can really host on whatever port you want. So as soon as you hit enter, it'll start hosting. Now I have Windows 7 and the Windows Firewall enabled, and it's wanted me to allow access for Caster, which I'm going to go ahead and do. So we can see right here my IP address and subnet mask, my IP address and port number that I'm hosting on. So once you start hosting as the host, Caster is going to automatically copy your IP information to the clipboard, and you can then paste that into a chat, and somebody can then copy your IP information and paste that into Caster to join your game. So I'm going to go ahead and see if somebody will test with me to connect, and I'll show you. So here, I've simply copied my IP information into my chat client here, and I'm just going to go and give it to him. And he'll just select the friggin' text straight from the chat, and he'll copy it in, and we can see he's connecting. And it's going to ask you if you're the host to enter a delay, and it's going to give you a recommended delay. You usually go with that, but you can change it however you want. You'll simply hit enter. It'll ask you versus or training mode. You usually want to go versus mode if you're going to play somebody. So versus mode, and it'll tell you, or ask you to specify a win count. Now this is like rounds per match and not matches. So rounds per match. Standard is 2, and that's what default is. So as soon as you hit enter for the 3rd time, Melty Blood will launch by itself via a script. just like going into training mode. It'll go to versus mode instead, and we'll both be in character select, and we'll be able to move around and select characters like normal. So yeah, that's how somebody connects to you. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out and see if he'll let me connect to him, and I can show you that. So he's going to do the same thing I just did in host, and he's going to post his IP information right here, and I'm going to simply select it and paste it into Netplay. So from the main menu, I'd hit option 1. I'd select his IP information and hit Control-C, or just copy it. Right click, copy. I'd go back over to Caster and Control-V it in, and voila, IP information. Simply hit enter, and I'd connect to him. And he's going to set the same settings that I set: delay, versus mode, and rounds. And the script would run and take us to character select again. So yep. Alright. So that's how you actually start up games and host. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the other requirements for playing Netplay. So your Melty Blood version needs to be version 1.04, and you can find that out by actually just scrolling over the file here, and you can right-click Properties, and it'll tell you under Details, file version 1.4.0. That's the one we want. You can also verify by actually executing the executable for MBAA, and at the top it'll give you the revision number, 1.04. That's what we want to see. You can further verify by actually launching the game. And as soon as we get to past the main menu, right here at the bottom on the Melty Blood splash screen, we can see the revision as well. So we need this revision to work. Netplay needs this revision in order to work, or the caster does. So long as your Melty Blood is revision 1.04, you should be able to join games. If you want to be able to host games and you're behind a router, you need to set up what's called port forwarding on your router. And basically what that does is it'll take traffic that's bound for your router's IP address, the external IP address, the one the internet sees you as, the one that's issued to you by your internet service provider, and it'll forward that information via a certain port to your local IP address that the router assigns to your actual computer. So remember that Melty Blood's default port number is 46318, but we can use whatever port we want. I'm going to stick to default, but a lot of people use non-default ports to run Melty Netplay. So if you're going to use a non-standard port, just keep in mind that you have to do what I'm about to do a little differently. So we can go into your router. You're going to log in, and you'll see some options. Now every router is pretty much different, but you're going to find options about security or a firewall, or it may just be off the main menu for port forwarding. It's called different things on different routers too. Generally it's always port forwarding, but on my router it's called virtual server. virtual server. Oh, it's going to want me to log in again. I timed out. So we're going to want to go to virtual server. Now here I already have the rule set up, but I'm going to go ahead and delete it and remake it. But we can see virtual server configuration. This function will allow you to route external internet calls for service, such as web services or FTP server or Melty Blood on port 46318 or whatever port you happen to be using, through your router to your internal network. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But this is the thing that we're looking for. The thing that routes external calls to certain services like Melty Blood to our internal network. Oops, I hit the back button. Alright, so normally there's not going to be anything here by default, so we're going to add a rule. And it'll pop up a window like this. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it MBAACC. Now the port value here just needs to be the port that you're running Melty on. 46318 is default. Wherever it talks about a port number, we're going to put this port number, whichever port number we're using. Now we need to port forward on both TCP and UDP. So in some cases you won't have a both option. You may just have TCP and UDP. In that case you'll have to create two rules, one for TCP and one for UDP. I have a both option, so I'm going to use both. And now you have to know what your current IP address is. Now I already know what mine is. It's 192.168.0.2. But this is the IP address that your router assigns to you. Now I'll show you how you get that information. But once you have all that entered in, simply add it. Eventually the rule will be there. Yep, there's the rule right there. Sweet deal. So I'll show you how to add in, or how to find your local IP address. So I have Windows 7. This may be a little different for other people, but there's going to be an icon down here in the taskbar for your internet, your local area connection, your NIC card. You're going to right click that and go to your share center, network and sharing center. You're going to change your adapter settings, and that'll open up your network adapters, which is your NIC card. You're going to right click it and go status, and you're going to hit details. And here where it says IP version 4 address, that's your IP address that's assigned to you from the router. So that's the IP address that you need to port forward to. Once we have all that information, you should be able to host. So you won't be able to host if you're behind a router without setting up port forwarding, usually. Sometimes that it works, but usually it doesn't. If you're not behind a router, you don't need to port forward to host. If you're behind a router and port forwarding doesn't work for you in order to host, you can still connect to other people who can host. So you do not need port forwarding set up in order to join games, only to host. So that's really all I have to show you about connecting via Caster version 2. So I'll keep trying to update these as there's major changes. Alright, thank you for watching. Have a good evening. Or day or whatever.